Hi. I wasn't, yeah, I didn't realize I was recording. Whoops. Okay, so, hi. It's, what is today? April 12th, 2022. It's snowing here in the Portland, Oregon area. Those of you who know this area know that it doesn't snow here really at all, ever. So the fact it's snowing in mid-April is super bizarre. In fact, this is the lowest it's ever, or this is the latest in a year that it's ever snowed. And we got like 4 or 5 inches yesterday. And it's supposed to snow again tomorrow. And this is after it was like 115 degrees last June, which never happens here either. So, yay, global warming. And those two are interconnected. Come on. Let's not pretend those things don't have anything to do with each other. This earth is melting fast. I don't know how many of you pay attention to the news. To me, this is something that everyone should know. There was a massive glacier that just fell into the ocean in the Antarctic a few weeks ago. So yeah, the sea levels are rising even further. Yay. Yeah. Yeah. Our time and the time of this earth is limited, folks. So yeah, make every moment count, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm not going to go off on much today because this is going to be a mammoth video. Lots to talk about. It's a band that I've thought about covering before. Kraftwerk, obviously, those of you who know how to read the titles of my videos. I try to avoid doing videos that are heavily talked about, we all know about. I mean, everyone knows Kraftwerk. Um, so I hesitate to do those bands. I'd rather do fringe bands or just bands that nobody knows about. I did a video on Cone Melt a few weeks ago, and I know very few people have heard of them. And I did Nights of Reb, and I usually do groups like that, Skinny Puppy, bands that are on the fringes. Like they had a modicum of success, but for the most part, they're kind of toiling away there on the fringes of popularity. I like doing video. There's enough. I guess the reason for that is there's enough videos out there for bands like Kraftwerk. And Depeche Mode's another one of my favorite bands. I don't know that I'll ever talk about them because, we all know about them. How many more videos? I mean, I guess maybe you guys could tell me if you'd want to see something like that. But, um, you know, the more popular bands I try to avoid because we all know about them. We know what the records look like and who cares. But I do love Kraftwerk, and I just bought a new record from them. I mean, new. It's stuff that had been released previously. They don't release new stuff very often, as we all know. But it sort of got me in the line of thinking about doing a video. And then I was going through some boxes of records and I came across my Kraftwerk collection. And so it was like, well, it's all here. I'm listening to them. I'm feeling inspired by them lately. So just, I don't know, why not talk about them? They're a great group. We all know why. I'm not going to explain who they are. Everyone here knows exactly who Kraftwerk is. We know their history. We know who they are. I'm not gonna hold everyone's hand through the idea of why these people are so great. We love Kraftwerk. They've been around for long enough for us to all of us have an opinion about Kraftwerk. So rather than give you a history lesson, which you can go do on your own, and which you all know anyway, I'm just gonna go through chronologically Kraftwerk's releases, what I have. I have all the albums. I have a good amount of singles, and I have some compilations, and I have different versions too, which makes it fun to talk about because these guys have a lot of catalog and they have a lot of versions, and so yeah, they're fun to talk about, and I'm going to do it and have fun. So there you go. So with Kraftwerk, well, not just Kraftwerk, with most bands, I tend to avoid getting reissues. I just don't need them. I have enough records as it is. So piling on to the collection I already have with a reissue or a repress, I don't typically do that. And I've been collecting records long enough where I just don't need it. Like, for me, if I have a really good original pressing, I don't, I mean, why would I buy a reissue? I mean, sometimes I do, because I love the album enough where I want to hear some differences. But for the most part, I don't ever buy reissues. Now, Kraftwerk, I did a few years ago. They reissued all of their albums on different colored vinyl, which I don't. Again, I don't normally like any color other than black or clear because generally they just don't get pressed right. They can be pressed right and sound okay, but the vast majority of colored vinyl out there just doesn't sound good. I would, if I'm standing there and I have a Kraftwerk album that's black or a Kraftwerk album that's blue, Autobahn, let's say, I'm going to get the black one every single time. It just sounds better. I'm buying this record to listen to. I'm not buying it to stare at it under a halogen light and stare at it. Wow, look at the colors. It's so pretty. No, I just want the music. I know plenty of I know there are plenty of fetishists out there in the collector market that just want to buy colored things and be dazzled by bright lights and colored vinyl. That's not me. I'd rather just buy the record and listen to it. I don't care what it looks like. Well, I do care what it looks like, I guess, because I would rather always have black vinyl. But a couple years ago, Kraftwerk records got reissued by Kraftwerk themselves, and that's why I bought them on colored vinyl. But yes, going back, I did buy them because they were all remastered by Ralph Hutter himself, and I just thought, you know what, Kraftwerk is giving me so much joy in my life. I'm gonna re-examine those and listen to these reissues. And they sound really good, I have to say. They were pressed nice. They're really cool packages. They come with these thick booklets. And anyway, I'll get to those. But generally, I don't buy reissues. So I'll just throw that out there. But this is a band, I do buy them, and I will compare the two because I've listened to all of them. So if there are those of you out there trying to consider whether or not you want to buy a reissue or go to the original issue of a Kraftwerk record, I might recommend you do both, or I might recommend you do one or the other. With Kraftwerk, you can't lose. If you see a Kraftwerk record, you should just buy it, regardless of what color it is and what year it came out. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I'll talk about my history with Kraftwerk. The first record I ever heard from Kraftwerk was Radioactivity, and it was my dad's album, and I actually still have it, and that will lead up to probably the most rare Kraftwerk record I have in my arsenal. It's the Radioactivity album, and I'll explain why my issue is rare. Most of my Kraftwerk stuff isn't very rare. It's pretty common, but I do have a couple of rarities. Um, with Kraftwerk, there was Radioactivity. My dad listened to that. That album came out in 1975, and I want to say I heard it in 1980, 1981. I was like 6, 7 years old when I first heard this record. And, it's just one of those records that changed me. I know it sounds corny and hokey, but Radioactivity is one of those records that I listened to obsessively and studied, and it made me want to be a musician and made me want to make music and all those things that you hear generally from people who are in music. It was that inspiring. It was a huge moment. And yeah, it's one of those watershed moments in music, I think. Radioactivity, I mean, Autobahn was great too, and that's a huge moment in itself. But I think in a lot of ways, going back and looking at Kraftwerk's catalog, I look at Radioactivity kind of as that point where they were like, screw it, we're going all in with electronics, and that's all there is to it. Because Autobahn still has some of their earlier prog-ish elements to it. Radioactivity doesn't have any. So I feel like Radioactivity was when the robots were starting to be born. But anyway, that's the beginning of my relationship with Kraftwerk. It was Radioactivity. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Kraftwerk album, and I'll talk about what my favorite is. But that's the great thing about Kraftwerk. It's if anyone says they have a certain favorite album from them, you can't argue with it. You know, they're all great. If someone wants to say Autobahn is their favorite, then you're like, you can see why. If they want to say Radioactivity is their favorite, you can see why. If they want to say Computer World is, or Man Machine, Trans Europe Express, even Electric Cafe, Techno Pop, it's like, you can see it. Like, okay, yeah. and even for me, it fluctuates. I feel like some days one album is my favorite, and other days another Kraftwerk album is my favorite. So they're all good. You can't buy a bad Kraftwerk record. That's the great thing about this band. And I will also say that I think Kraftwerk, and this isn't a surprise to those of you who know Kraftwerk very well, but for me, Kraftwerk is the Beatles of electronic music. They just are. There was year zero in electronic techno pop music, and it was created by Kraftwerk. And what they did bled over into hip hop and electro and so many other genres. The impact of what Kraftwerk has done musically it's immeasurable. You cannot measure it. Have been such a massive influence on everybody. Uh, yeah, it just is what it is. It's Kraftwerk. They're amazing and they have changed everything. And if you're less initiated and you're watching this video and you don't know them as well, go out and do some research, listen to the music, and consider the time period that it came out. That's key when it comes to Kraftwerk. You can listen to, I always talk about this on this channel, but I think this is really important. You have to listen to a record understanding when it came out. You can't just listen to a record that came out in 1975 in 2022 and be like, oh, it sounds dated, man. No. You have to somehow imagine being alive in the year 1975 and listen to other records that were coming out in 1975 and then compare what you're hearing with Kraftwerk against everything else. When you do that, and when you finally have the time to make the mental space you need to do that, you'll understand how ahead of their time they were and still are. Stuff that Kraftwerk was doing over 40 years ago is still cutting edge, I think. Nothing sounds like it. And they set a framework and a groundwork that still hasn't been matched. Everyone's been trying to catch up to them. Really popular bands have even gone to the lengths of stealing their whole, identity, and like Daft Punk. And I like Daft Punk, but where do you think the robots came from? And I think Daft Punk would be the first to admit that. They're not hiding it. But their whole aura was taken from Kraftwerk, okay? So for those of you who don't know Kraftwerk as well, go back, listen to everything, and picture when these albums came out. They changed everything. Anyway, yes, my start was with Radioactivity. Now, first record I'll show is this. This is a UK issue of the first two Kraftwerk records. I don't have the original German pressings. Kraftwerk albums 1 and 2 came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and they had cones on the cover. And I have never seen those personally. I have been record collecting for, I don't know, since the 80s, and I have never seen either one of those original German Kraftwerk pressings. I just haven't seen them ever. If I saw one, I'd buy it. Unless it was, crazy money. But this is a UK reissue of both the first two Kraftwerk records. They're both in here. This came out on Vertigo. That's the Vertigo label. Double album. Like I said, the first, it's kind of got a glossy cover. It's got a nice gatefold cover too. This copy I have is really in immaculate condition. I found this. You see this cone here, that Kraftwerk with the cone behind it? That's what their first two albums look like. And this is back when it was just Ralph and Florian, just two guys. And these two albums were, more prog, lots of flute, lots of new agey sounds. Doesn't sound anything like what Kraftwerk sounds like now, but it's good. Both of these albums are really good in their own way. They're just kind of innocent, fluffy slices of, psychedelic krautrock from the 60s. And I think, hopefully I just was able to paint a bit of a picture for you. It's not bad. I think most Kraftwerk fans do not consider these two records to be their best, but it's their first couple of albums. They're just kind of getting their footing and figuring out who they wanted to be. And that meant that they were experimenting and trying to find their footing and discover who they were as a band. So I would recommend picking that up or those up. Again, this is just a compilation of the first two albums. Like I showed before, both of the first two albums, the German pressings, they both have like a cone on the cover. Again, I've never seen them. Well before my time, but normally I've done so many. I've dove through so many record bins in my life. I'm still surprised I've never seen those. But they're German imports, and they were limited even then. So they're just, I don't know. You don't see them around in America. At least I haven't. Now this is their third record, Ralph and Florian, and I love these old Kraftwerk cover. I mean, look at those guys. I mean, you think of them as the robots well, Florian's dead, so he's not anything anymore. But you think of these guys being the robots, and here they are in their studio tinkering away. But yeah, you think of these guys being the robots now. That's all they are. They never do interviews. They're totally out of the limelight, have been for years. But then you see these like really innocent pictures of these guys. I mean, look at that. They look happy and just happy to be alive and making music. Very much, I think, diametrically opposed to the image they put out there now, where they're cold and clinical and never talk to anybody. Anyway, it's like an old high school photo or something. Like, smile. Anyway, um, this is on Vertigo. This is a U.S. pressing of this. This actually got released after this got released in the U.S. after Autobahn, because Autobahn came out in 1973. And then when that album got successful, the US market re-released this after that. But this album actually came out, I want to say 1970. Was it 1970? 71? Somebody help me out with that. This is their third album. I think it came out in 1971. And this is like the first two records. It's kind of fluffy, light, psychedelia. Uh, it's not bad. There's a little bit of more electronics on this one, a little more than the others, the first two albums. They're starting to the electronics are starting to take some shape here a little bit. It's still very much grounded in psychedelic rock, but you're starting to hear the electronics a little bit more. This is a really good album too, very underrated. When I first heard it, I don't know, back in the 80s at some point, I was like, I was so into what Kraftwerk was doing then, like the techno pop stuff they were doing. So when I heard this, I was like, God, is this the same band? But over the years, I've really grown to enjoy this record. It's really good. Excellent stuff. I would highly recommend getting that. I don't know how easy this is to find either. I don't think it's very common. Now that I think about it, I think this is probably the only copy I've ever seen. And I bought this way, way, way back in the day. So now we'll get into some. Actually, I'm gonna grab this one first. Yeah, that makes sense. This one we all know. This came out in 1973. This is when the Kraftwerk as we know it became Kraftwerk. This is kind of ground zero. And when it comes to all the reissues with this band, they start here. They don't ever reissue the first three records. They only reissue from here up. And you can kind of see why. In terms of how we know Kraftwerk today, this was where they started. This is a very electronic album. Oh, and look at that picture. How do you not love that? Look at these guys. Another high school photo. And here they are in the rearview mirror. Kind of a funny cover. And yeah, this is a U.S. issue. Most of my Kraftwerk records are U.S. issues because I'm an American and that's where I find them. Still has the original inner sleeve. Back then in the 70s, these inner sleeves, they would try to promote other bands on the label. But yeah, this is how we know Autobahn, right? The first track alone, it takes up the whole side one. It's just a 22-minute long electronic journey. And it should be a journey, literally, because it's about the Autobahn, right? Get in a car, you take a journey, you put on Autobahn, you take another journey. It was always one of my dreams too to listen to this while I drove on the Autobahn, but that hasn't happened. I have been to Germany, but I didn't have to drive, so there you go. But yes, this is how we know Kraftwerk, right? This is where it started. And I don't need to explain why this album's brilliant. It was changed a lot of people's view of music, and it created all in one fell swoop electronic pop. You don't believe it? Go do your history. This is where it starts. Every little piece of techno fluff you hear on the radio these days, it all originates from this. There are other stuff that you can link it to, but this is the first time a electronic pop song became popular. This is it. And it's a great song. And you want to hear the full version too. There are lots of edits because you can't play a 22-minute song on the radio. But this album version is great. So this is the reissue that I bought a couple years ago. And I'll kind of show it off because I don't know, people seem to enjoy this kind of shit when you show colors. Blue. Now, I was skeptical upon buying anything that's not black, as I have mumbled many times before, but this is a really solid pressing. It's remastered very nicely. There's the inner sleeve. You kind of get the cover of that American version, so it's slightly different. The inner sleeve, obviously, not slightly different. It is very different. You get a different cover. Now, I think this was the original German cover. Us Americans got the cover of them on the car and driving, and I think in Germany this was always the cover. And then a really nice touch to these reissues is each one of these reissues gets these booklets, and they just have illustrations, something that you can kind of look at while you listen to the music. I would wholeheartedly recommend you pick up these reissues. Like if you don't, if you're younger and you just, weren't around when these original pressings came out, or the original pressings are too much money, I would highly recommend picking these up. They sound really, really nice. Now, this is moving on to the album I was talking about earlier. And this is the most rare Kraftwerk record I have. This is the original German press of Radioactivity. Now, here's the back. The reason this physical copy is so rare is that it came with a sheet of stickers that say Radioactivity. I would guess that most people who had these, the idea was to take these stickers out and plaster them all over the jacket. But my dad never did that. He bought this record back in the day, and he conserved the sticker sheet. By the way, my father gave me all his record collection about 15, 20 years ago because he doesn't listen to records anymore. So he gave them all to me. And he had, I don't know, he had a couple thousand records, mostly blues and jazz and soul and krautrock. He had a disco phase too. Not a lot of disco records, but the disco he did have was really cool. But he also loved Kraftwerk and Can and, the more well-known krautrock bands. But anyway, this is why this is rare. I think I've never seen another copy where all the stickers are still here. So, yeah, and it's in German too. I think a lot of Kraftwerk collectors like to get German-only pressings. You know what? This is going to be a pain in my ass trying to put this back in here. So I'm going to put it all in here at once. Here is the inner sleeve. I mean, come on. How do you not love this? Look at these guys. I don't know who this guy is. He photobombed this. Hey, stand in front of the antenna tower. Hey, who's that guy? I mean, seriously, who is this? Anyway. This is just a side note too. Back in the 70s and 80s, these inner sleeves, they were paper, and then they're lined with, they have a poly-lined inner. So you see that? It's poly-lined on the inside and then paper on the outside. It was brilliant. It was a great idea, and nobody does it anymore. Drives me nuts. You want your records in the poly sleeve, so to be able to wrap paper around it, it's just a great idea. This record is in perfect condition, near mint, okay? When you slide these records in and out of these paper sleeves over time, they get scuffed up. But when you put them in the poly inners, they don't get scuffed up. This record's almost 50 years old, and it's like a new record. There's not a mark on it. And it's because of that poly lined inner, period. I wish record companies would do that again. But yeah, they only did it for like a limited time in the 70s and 80s and then stopped doing it. Anyway, that is my copy, my rare copy of Radioactivity. And a great record. I explained why before. This was my intro point to these guys. And yeah, this is like a very intense album. If I had to pick one album out of theirs that was most intense, it would be this one. It seems, the message is prescient, and also it's just a very kind of stark album. Not a lot of pop ditties on this. Yeah, it's I don't know. In a lot of ways, I think it's their darkest album. It's got a dark cover. Everything about it is dark. Dark message and dark music, dark lyrics. Great album. Here's the reissue. You get bright yellow. And you could probably, here's the inner sleeve, cover of the old album, see there, back cover. And as you would probably guess, the color is solid yellow. So you get a radioactive record, radioactive cover, no radioactive stickers on this one, but you do get the booklet, like all the reissues get. There they are, ready to go, drumsticks in hand. This is some of the imagery too that you see live. When you see these guys live now, there's a big screen behind them. They're actually touring again right now. They're coming to town here in a couple of months. It's another 3D tour, so yeah, I think I'll probably go to that. I try to see Kraftwerk every time I can, and they're coming to town. So, and let's face it, these guys are Ralph Hutter is no spring chicken anymore. I mean, how old is this guy? 80? I mean, the fact he's still going is really impressive. As I mentioned, Florian Schneider died a few years ago. Karl Bartos and Wolfgang Flür haven't been in the band for years. They're off doing their own thing. So, Ralph is the only one left. But, he was the creative force behind the band. So here's their next album. Now, this is the original US issue. Again, look at this cover. I mean, classic stuff. Look at that. Florian's got quite the forehead, very shiny. They all have shiny foreheads, really. Some serious photoshopping going on here. This is the back cover, another high school shot. I like the curtain in the back. It's like they're on the Johnny Carson show or something. Very professional. The inner sleeve, another classic photo of them. Check that out, having lunch, sitting at a table with no food on it. I don't know what that says. Here's the label. There are tons of different versions of Trans Europe Express. I think most things I've ever read about this record, and when people are talking about their favorite Kraftwerk record, they always say Trans Europe Express. And again, I can't argue with that. I don't know that it's my favorite, but it's a beautiful record. It's flawless. There's nothing wrong with this record. It is such a good album. Yeah, some really, really beautiful stuff. This came out in 1977, right during the punk wave, and I think most punk rockers loved Kraftwerk. If you go and ask, John Lydon from Public Image or Joy Division or any of those post-punk guys, they all say that these guys are the bands they were listening to. The band that they were listening to, Kraftwerk. I mean, that's who you listened to. They just were good. They beat down all those barriers of punk and pop, and it didn't matter. They just were so good. You had to stop and listen to them, and that's what I love about Kraftwerk. I think what I like most about them is they force you to pay attention. It's like a Stanley Kubrick movie. Like when there's a Kubrick movie on, you can't not watch it. Even if you don't like it, you have to sit there and watch it. And it's the same with Kraftwerk. When there's a song playing, you have to stop and listen. It's like your body just gives in. All of a sudden you're just subservient to this vision that is so singular to one guy, Ralph Hutter, that you have to stop and listen. It commands your attention. How often does that happen? Not very often in music. This is the repress, different cover. I don't know. I don't know if this was the original cover in Germany. I don't know. German peeps, if there are any German peeps watching, tell me. I don't know. Here's the cover of the US version on the inner sleeve. See some showroom dummies going on here. Clear. And this is more like see-through clear. Yeah. Another great pressing. All of these reissues were remastered by Hutter himself and cut very well, and they sound amazing. Yeah, here's the booklet. I'll show a few photos. Some more high school shots. What do we got here? Here's the showroom dummies. Definitely, they were really starting to toy with the idea of being dummies, robots. Really started cementing itself here. An amazing album right here, and yeah, there's just not a bad second on here. I'd recommend one song, but they're all good. Now, this is their next album. This would follow in 1978, so they pretty quickly had a pretty quick turnaround time for this album, which we don't know Kraftwerk for. We all know that Kraftwerk takes their time with their albums. In fact, they haven't made an album in almost 20 years. And their last album in 2003 was, basically kind of a rehash of older stuff they had done. But this came out in 1978. Man Machine. Here's the inner sleeve. This is the US press. Now, when people ask me what my favorite Kraftwerk record is, it's usually my mind goes here. And I don't quite know why. I think there are a couple tracks on here that I love so much. Maybe my favorite Kraftwerk tunes. My mind always goes here, but it changes. There's another album that came out after this that I frequently think is my favorite, but this is usually where my mind automatically goes. I love this record. This is one of my all-time faves. This is a top 20 record for me. Mainly, I think, because of Space Lab. Space Lab arguably is my favorite Kraftwerk track. I think in a lot of ways, Space Lab is the first techno pop song ever. Go listen to it, and keep in mind this album came out in 1978. When I hear Space Lab, even to this day, it hasn't aged. You could play it on top 40 radio and it would somehow work. And that is the testament to how great this band is. Space Lab. Arguably my favorite Kraftwerk track. Neon lights, the model, the robot. I mean, it's only 6 tracks, but you're getting 35 minutes of amazing music. It's a brief album, but every minute on here is not wasted. How many double albums do we buy that are 75 minutes long and only 20 minutes of it is really good? Here you're getting 35 minutes of mind-blowing, history-defining music. Boom, Man Machine. Check it out. And you all have. I'm sure anyone watching this video, you've heard that album a million times, like me. Here's the repress, different covers you can see. Showroom dummies on the back. You could probably guess what color vinyl this is going to be, right? Boom. Red. You get a slightly different shade of their faces here. The robots are starting to come full force, as you can see. And again, this is such a beautiful record. I mean, again, I think there's only one other album that competes with this, and it's the album that came out right after this, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Here we go. Showroom dummies and robots are starting to kind of meld together. I love that picture. And those of you who see them live now, You'll see a lot of this kind of imagery. The robots and the showroom dummies start making themselves more present. I love this photo too. And this is my impressionable youth too. Like this album came out when I was just a few years old, but my first memories of music are around this time. So when I see this imagery, it just reminds me of me being a toddler, what memories I do have. And so I think I'm emotionally connected to this record the most as well. Now this is just a fun. This is a single. This is the earliest single I have from them. This is the model and neon lights. Has the cover of the last two albums on here to promote the records. But what's cool about this is that the record is on glow in the dark vinyl. Now it's 1:30 in the afternoon here where I am, so you can't see it. But this is glow in the dark and it still works. I just pulled this out last night as I was thinking about doing this video, and I held it up to a light, turned the lights off, and boom, it still glows, man. This record's like almost 50 years old. So very fun to have. All right, now this is their next album, Computer World, and now this is the other record that I compare to Man Machine. I love this record. I will always be in love with this record. This is a beautiful slice of history. Electro started here, okay? It did. Don't listen to anyone else. The facts are here. Electro started here on this record. If you like electro music, which bleeds into hip hop, which bleeds into techno pop, it all started on this record, period. Computer World. This is one of the most influential records in history. And it shows. It has aged exceptionally well. This album got released when computers were first starting to become a thought in terms of like being in everybody's homes. Because back then computers were the size of a car. They were the size of a Buick, and you couldn't even fit them in your garage. But this was right when home computers were starting to become a thing. So you have to kind of picture that futuristic idea mixed with this really beautifully written and produced music. Again, this is a very brief album, only like 7 tracks and 35 minutes long, but there's not a single misstep. It's 35 minutes of gorgeousness, gorgeosity, as Alex DeLarge would say. Unbelievable album. And songs like Computer Love and Numbers, just insane. Computer World and Numbers are two of the greatest electronic tracks in history, period. But everything on here is amazing. This is the US edition. I don't know. Inner sleeve's kind of getting stuck here. I'm not going to wrestle with it, but well, screw it. I'll pull it out. There we go. There's the inner sleeve. Robots in full effect. And by the way, YouTube the video for Pocket Calculator. It is so good and so funny. It's basically these 4 guys performing live, and they have these little pocket calculators they're holding, and they let people push the buttons and make their own little tunes. People are dancing in front. It looks like there's 20 people there. It's amazing to see that now. But yeah, they're playing live, and they're letting the crowd members push the buttons on the keypad, making these little tones. It's really cool. It's a great video. And then here's the reissue. It's exact same cover. I don't know. I guess they felt like it wasn't necessary to create their own cover there. Here's the inner sleeve, and here's the booklet. Boom. You get a lot of images of that cover. Let's see. What's this? Oh, got some lyrics for Pocket Calculator. Computer Love over here. The lyrics for Computer Love. Let's see. Robots. So yeah, it's I've listened to these albums, and leafing through these booklets kind of makes the experience cool. It puts you in a headspace that you definitely need to be in. Yeah, one of the great albums of all time. Seriously, if you're just getting into Kraftwerk, and I have talked to people who are just getting into Kraftwerk, I generally recommend going to this album first. I think it's a really excellent starting point. because most of Kraftwerk's albums are a little more challenging than this. This one's just like catchy pop tune after catchy pop tune. So this is a good entry point, I think. I mean, you want to listen to all Kraftwerk records, but I wouldn't recommend someone going and listening to Ralph and Florian, for instance, as a starting point. This is a single I have from this Computer World album. This is a U.S. promo. Came out on Warner Brothers. Still got the Warner Brothers inner sleeve there, but this is unique in that it has Dentaku, which is basically the Japanese version of Pocket Calculator. As you can imagine, this song was huge in Japan. Again, one of the brilliant things that Kraftwerk conceived is this idea of universal languages and penetrating language barriers. That's why they're so popular across the world. They sing their songs in different languages. And this is a great example of why they're big in Japan. When this song drops in front of a Japanese audience, they go apeshit. And it's a great song. I mean, this is one of their catchiest, arguably their catchiest song they ever did. If you're looking for pop hooks, look no further than Pocket Cat. I mean, what a great song. Just fun, kind of goofy, funny. Kraftwerk has a very wry sense of humor too. People see them as these dry, emotionless, humorless robots, but they're really not. They're pretty funny. You listen to the lyrics and their whole image, and there's a lot of humor there. You just have to look for it. And then this is a single they put out after Computer World. This is the U.S. edition of Tour de France. This has a Francois K remix on the B-side. Francois K is Francois Kevorkian. Kevorkian's one of those guys, if you buy records, like dance records from the 80s and 90s, you probably have a record with a remix from him on it. He was all over the place, and he's still around, and he's amazing. One of the best DJs I've ever seen. But yeah, I can't even, to name everything Kevorkian has been involved with would be impossible. Kraftwerk, Depeche Mode, you name it. He's remixed everybody and put out his own stuff too, and it's all really, really solid stuff. Okay. Electric Cafe. Now this is the original title to this. They wanted to name this Techno Pop, but they went with this instead. Electric Cafe. This is the US edition, has the US promo stamp here. This came in a gatefold sleeve. There are the robots. There's the inner sleeve. Boom, boom, boom. And you see a lot of these images on their tours now too. Especially during Music Nonstop, you see these guys bobbing their heads and tapping their feet. It's really cool. In fact, Music Nonstop, I think, is the best song. Where are you? There you are. The last song on side 1. For me, that's the best song they perform live. It is amazing. It's just truly inspiring, heart-skipping stuff when they do Music Nonstop. It is so good. Live version is way better than the album version. But this is a cool album. I think generally Kraftwerk fans, this is the least favorite of their later period. And I can see why. It's kind of, by this point in the mid-'80s, Kraftwerk, like everyone had caught up to Kraftwerk. Like everyone between 1973 and 1981, everyone was trying to catch up to Kraftwerk. But then after Computer World came out, everyone caught up to them. So this record kind of sounds like Kraftwerk trying too hard to be Kraftwerk, if that makes any sense. I think they had lost a step and they weren't sure how to reclaim that step. And so this album's good, but it doesn't really push many boundaries. It sounds like Kraftwerk and it's great in that way, but it just kind of sounds like them trying to almost recapture something that they had. And they didn't need to do that. I think if they had made a more straight ahead techno album, that would have been a better move. But they're a pop group at their heart, so they tried to make pop songs. Again, this is a really excellent album. Don't get me wrong, it's excellent. First song, Boing Boom Chuck. I mean, just insanely good. But yeah, it's the one Kraftwerk album where you kind of feel like they're trying to be something that they're not. It's sort of an awkward album. Doesn't quite work perfectly, but it's still excellent. Now, this is the reissue, and they called it Technopop. See that? That was the original title they wanted, and they renamed it. And also, this has an extra track on it, House Phone. Yes, indeed. Which is basically just it's just a version of the telephone call, which is on the original version of Electric Cafe. They toss another track on there. So you get some more music on here. And House Phone's pretty good. It's basically like a house mix of the telephone call. Inner, another clear. This one's a little more cloudy. The clear vinyl on the Trans Europe Express is clear. This one's a little cloudier. So this is like a cloudy clear. Trans Europe Express is a see-through clear. And then here is the booklet, more faces, you know, lots of this kind of stuff on the inside. I hope I'm centering this right. Oh, here are the tapping feet that you really get a good sense of this when you see them live. By the way, see them live. I know COVID's happening and like it's super sketch. I don't want to be out in public either. But if you go see them in a concert hall where they're requiring people to be vaccinated, which is where they're playing here in my town, I'm going. See this band live because listen, these guys are Ralph Hutter's like 80. He's not going to be around with us anymore very soon. So check him out. I hope he lives forever, but he's not. So go check him out. Here's a single. This is the telephone call. You'll notice that House Phone. Oh, you see one of my turntables there, the reflection. House Phone right there, which ended up on the reissue of Technopop. Good single. You want to have that one. And then this is the other single from Technopop, Electric Cafe, Music Nonstop. Kind of a weak single. It just has like it has the album version and then the 7-inch version, and that's it. That's all you get. So, I don't know. Not a great single to have. Not a lot of bonus stuff on there, but whatever. You buy it because it's Kraftwerk. Okay. This came out in 1991. This is the mix. This is a compilation. It's kind of a greatest hits, but they remixed everything. And this came out in 1991, so it's got a lot of like 90-ish sounding techno. This is the US edition. I still have the original shrink wrap on it. Here's what they call hype sticker. If you ever see someone saying they're selling a record with the hype sticker still on it, that's what they mean. Basically hyping the record. The US edition. Let me pull this out. It's a pretty decent pressing, as I remember. Got some good custom inner sleeves. I don't know what the German edition or the European edition looks like, but I assume this original 1991 pressing looks somewhat like this. Kind of a cool cover, I think. I always kind of like this cover. There's Florian. And here is the reissue. Nice big thick vinyl too. When you grab this, you can feel it. It's just thick, big, heavy. Good pressing. All of these reissues, really nice reissues. So you get those photos again, get some action there. Both discs are white, which I don't know. I felt like that was a missed opportunity. I felt like with the red arrow here, it would have been kind of cool to have like a red clear on one of them and then white on the white and red. That would have been kind of cool, but whatever. The booklet on this is really cool because this is when they were in full robot mode. I really like this picture. Look at him. He's like, hey man, you're disturbing me. Leave me alone. Here's a robot taking a leak. That's what we really haven't seen and are dying to see, right? The robot's going to the bathroom. We need to see that. There's that. Another cool photo. Yeah, this is probably my favorite booklet of all of them. Yeah, just robot stuff. So, yeah, again, this is like a really nice, thick 180 gram pressing. Like I've said in past videos, all right, this is going to take me an hour just to get this back in the jacket here. But I've said in past videos, just because a record is 180 grams doesn't make it better. It depends on how you press it. You can press a record at 500 grams and it's that thick. It can still sound like shit. You have to press it right. So this is an instance where it's 180 grams and it sounds great. It's pressed correctly. So I recommend getting that. Here's a single that they released with this album, The Robots. This is the US press. It's got some remixes of The Robot. And they're all very techno, early 90s techno-ish. They sound very, they're pretty hard, like hard techno. I would almost describe them, they have like an underground resistance type feel. Those of you who, like the UR crew, you'll find a lot to like here. And Kraftwerk would actually later homage the UR guys by having them remix some of their stuff, which I'll get to here in a few minutes. But this is a really cool single. I think an even better single from this mix album is this. This is a US press of Radioactivity. They re-released this with William Orbit and, again, Francois Kevorkian mixes. So Francois K is all over this. Excellent remixes here. I like this better than the Robots. Yes. And William Orbit was, he did plenty of great stuff back then, remix-wise. Okay, so after that, we have this. Tour de France soundtracks. And this is a really cool album. This was the album, they hadn't released an album of new material since 1986 with Electric Cafe, and then this came out in 2003, 17 years later. And this is an excellent album. They just kind of came out of nowhere and dropped this, and it's so good. I really, really love this album. Definitely one of my favorite Kraftwerk records. As you might imagine, the records are in red and blue with white inner sleeves, honoring the French flag. And it works for Americans too, red, white, and blue. It works for all kinds of countries. There you go. Here is the booklet. Tour de France, people cycling, as most Kraftwerk fans probably know. Ralph Hutter is a bicycling maniac in real life. He's got a ton of passion for it, and this was his homage to the Tour de France. And it's a really cool album. Such a good album. I don't know if this album gets respected like it should or not. I really don't know. I feel like maybe because it's a later Kraftwerk album, maybe it gets ignored. But this is a excellent record. If you've never heard this, check it out. And this is the only version I have. I never bought this on vinyl at the time. I didn't get it through any of my record pools. I always had it on CD. So I was happy to buy this reissue because it's the first time I've had it on vinyl. Okay, so, in some ways, I think this next release, even though it's a compilation of sorts, this might be my favorite Kraftwerk release. It's this, Minimum Maximum. This is a live album. Came out in 2005. And this was the first time Kraftwerk had toured in over a decade. So there was a ton of buildup for this. People were hot with anticipation. And so, that's the backdrop to this. Here's the track listing. Yeah, the backdrop to this was like they hadn't toured in a long time. No one had heard anything from them. They hadn't released much new material other than the Tour de France soundtracks album. But in a lot of ways, this is my favorite release. It's so good. Hearing the crowd freaking out in the background, like they play Pocket Calculator in Japan and they do the Dentaku version of it. You hear them screaming, and they do Numbers in San Francisco, and like the track Numbers is just insane, really powerful stuff. Music Nonstop, the live version of that. I think it's in Russia, I want to say. Yeah, it's in Russia. It's basically a compilation of live tracks from all over the world, but they mix it together to make it sound like one show. It is an incredible album. You get 4 records with this. Unfortunately, there's no booklet, but each record has its own jacket. They all come with these black printed generic inner sleeves. But it's a very nice pressing. It sounds good. Here's the inside of the lid. So yeah, it's kind of a cool release. The details are here, but you can see where this is where you hear them playing. You hear them playing in Europe, you hear them playing in Japan, you hear them playing in Australia, North America, South America. They're all over the map. I would highly recommend picking this up if you can find it. I don't know how rare this is. I would assume it's not easy to find. Here's record 2. Just plain black covers, not very exciting. Let me see. I think there's 4. Yeah, I almost said there's 5, but there's 4 records in here. Here's record 3, Numbers. This is them playing Numbers live. And then obviously here's them playing Robots live. But yeah, pick this record up, or this box up if you can. And here's what's on the back lid. Dudes in glow-in-the-dark spandex in their 60s and 70s. Now, while that image isn't great, you don't have to stare at them too much when you see them live. Seeing them live is a barrage of the senses, especially now that they do these 3D shows. It's all 3D. So you're not wanting to look at the guys on stage. You're wanting to look everywhere else. And the music sounds insane. I mean, Kraftwerk puts a ton of work into how they sound as well as their visuals. So there's that. Okay. Oh, here's another box set. Now this was the 3D. I still have my shrink wrap on here, by the way. I've opened the records out of here, but this is the 3D live album they put out. I think they put this out in 2016, I want to say. Oh geez, I can't see it. 2016, 2017, something like that. It's been out like 5 years or so. Hefty box. There's 8 records in here. And each album from Autobahn up through Tour de France has its own live album in full. So each record is performed live, and they're all represented here. I'll pull one. I'm not going to pull them all out, but here is, I think this is Tour de France, isn't it? I think this is, yes. This is Tour de France. Every track from Tour de France performed live. And it goes all the way back to Autobahn. They do not do the first 3 albums. As I mentioned before, they seem content to not address those albums anymore. So, yeah, pick this up. Live Kraftwerk, really good stuff. And this is absolutely necessary in my opinion. This is the 3D box of the catalog, the Blu-rays. So you get some killer Dolby sound on this box set, and I want to open this up because this comes with a book. This is basically just concert footage from them on tour on 2 different Blu-rays. Unfortunately, it's not 4K, but 4K wasn't really a thing yet when this came out. But look at this book, huge book you get with this. Tons of stuff to check out. Imagery. This is the kind of shit that they show on their screens live when you're seeing them perform. This is what's going on in the background behind them. So it's when you're watching the video, and I've done this, like flipping through the book while you're doing it. This is Space Lab, by the way. When you're flipping through this book while you're watching the video, it really enhances the experience. Space Lab actually not only one of my favorite songs, but it's really great live because Kraftwerk uses Google Maps to do this whole thing behind them. Like they picture themselves as these aliens, and then you see your town that they're performing in. You see your town pop up on Google Maps, and then the UFOs land in your town, and they all get out of the UFO, and the crowd always goes nuts. In my case, it was Portland, so we're all sitting there, and they're playing Space Lab, and you see this spaceship come, and then they land in Portland, Oregon. So yeah, the crowd goes nuts. Pretty, they do that wherever you are. Nice touch. Here's the the Blu-ray. But the best part, I saved my 3D glasses from when I saw them live, so I've got this stuck in here. I have a 3D TV too, and I've watched this in 3D. It's pretty cool. I have a TV that converts 2D to 3D. They don't make these anymore. It's an old plasma television. It's a killer TV. I do have a 4K TV, but I hang on to the plasma because it's got so many weird functionalities to it, and I like to keep it. But anyway, 3D glasses from when I saw them on tour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Kraftwerk 3D glasses. In fact, I'm wondering if we get another. Yeah, I could probably use these for the next show, but why would I do that? I can get a pair of brand new glasses, right? Anyway, I love this box set. Very cool. It's very heavy, very sturdy. That box is massive. Worth every penny. Okay. My last one I'm going to talk about is something I just got, and this is why I wanted to talk about Kraftwerk. Is I just bought this. It's a triple pack. 3 records are stuffed in here, and basically about 20 years ago they had this Disco 2000 single, or Expo 2000, and some new remixes of old songs and newer ones at the time, like these Aerodynamic. But this is the first time these are all on vinyl, so I was really excited to get this, and I haven't even opened this yet. So this will be like my first unboxing video, as it were. I'm gonna crack this open, pull these out, see what you get. Maybe you get something, maybe you don't. Okay, so you get no booklet in there. You do get custom printed inner sleeves for each record. Not much going on, but disc 2, just disc 1. There is a colored variant of this. I just discovered this. I was looking up there. Yeah, this is black. This is black. I guess on their website, if you pre-ordered this from their website, you got some different colored vinyl, but I missed that. I'm okay with that. It's just nice having all of these remixes in one package. So, per usual with Kraftwerk, they do a nice job with the presentation of everything they do. And these are thick records. You can feel it. It's heavy. Anyway, just released. Pick this up. So yeah, there's my Kraftwerk video. I'm not gonna get too much into why I love this band, because you know why I love this band. Kraftwerk is a group that just doesn't need any explanation as to why they're great. We all know why they're great. I'm not gonna go into why I think they're great, with the exception of saying that they are absolutely one of my favorite bands of all time. Whenever I hear them, it's this mixture of like remembering my childhood and reminiscing about old times, and I feel a lot of the nostalgia when I hear them, but I also hear what's so great about even music to this day. Like when I hear brand new techno records, I still think Kraftwerk was doing it way better 40 plus years ago. So that's just one of the magical things about Kraftwerk. They never die. They never age. We will always have these records. And yeah, it's what greater gift can you give another human being? Giving them something that they can enjoy until the day they die. Kraftwerk does that. They haven't released anything new in almost 20 years. It doesn't matter. We still have everything they did. Everything they did blazed a trail that will forever be there for everybody else to listen to and to be inspired by. That's why I love Kraftwerk. So anyway, thanks for hanging with me today. And until next time, which I don't know when that will be, any recommendations or any requests, feel free to let me know what you think. If there's a band out there you want me to talk about, let me know. Sometimes that helps me be inspired to talk about a band. There are so many records in my collection, I have a hard time focusing on one. So if anybody out there wants to hear me rattle on about a band or hold up certain records from a band, let me know. If I have them, I certainly would like to talk about them. So anyway, until next time, thanks.